Hey everybody, Robot here from Vespa Motorsport, ScooterWest.com. For all things Vespa, check us out on the web. So you're probably watching this video, you already own a Primavera or a Sprint, either a 150 or a 50cc. Well, pretty much everything I go over applies to pretty much any of the Vespa models. It almost exactly applies to a Vespa LX, an ET4. The two-stroke shifty ones are kind of completely different, but there's a lot of stuff you do want to check out. So today I'm going to show you everything you need to know about keeping your scooter in between the standard service intervals. So quickly I'll go over the service intervals on a Primavera 150. So the first service, it's due at 625 miles. You can look in the owner's manual, find a service schedule, and it outlines exactly what you're supposed to do. And it's not just an oil change, there's more to it. So I'm not going to go into every single part of it because I have several videos in the past that talk about doing all those services if it's something you want to tackle yourself and not take to a dealer. The nice thing about the newer models, they do have a little wrench that comes on, a mileage-based indicator. And once you get past the first service, services on this model are every 6,250 miles, or 10,000 kilometers is what that translates to. I do recommend an oil change in between, and I would definitely recommend just servicing it, changing the oil every 2 years, same with the brake fluid and other fluids. Just a good preventive maintenance, just to do that every 2 years, have a professional look over the scooter. There's stuff as these scooters get old that just degrades regardless, such as the air filter is made of foam. You may only have 50 miles on it, but in 10 years that part's probably going to need to be replaced. So now I'm going to go into the care and feeding of your scooter in between rides. And I'll kind of chime in on how often you use some of these products. I have separate videos on cleaning the scooter. That's also very important, but I'm not going to cover that right now. But we have several products that help you clean the scooters, but it's very similar to cleaning a car. So pretty much any videos how to detail the body of a car is going to apply to a Vespa scooter, because they're kind of like a mini car. They're a painted bodywork on it, similar finishes you find on a car. But the most important thing you need to know about is keeping the air pressure and checking the air pressure in the tires. A couple ways to go about it. You can have just the basic tire pressure gauge, the one that looks like a stick that they've been selling for like 60 years probably at this point. They're super reliable, simple, inexpensive. That's a good way to check the tire pressure. But the more modern and convenient way to do that is with one of these all-in-one cordless air inflators. They have a real accurate pressure gauge in there, and you could set it to different units. Usually in the United States we use PSI. You can use it both to measure the tires and also inflate them as needed. So if you're ever wondering what the air pressure is, you just need to find the vehicle identification plate. It's a metal placard on the scooter. On these 2024s, it's located on this left side of this floorboard tunnel. It has the VIN number, the date of manufacture, and the gross vehicle weight, along with the tire sizes and the tire pressures. So front, 26.1, and the rear recommended pressure is 36.3. I usually always run about 26 in the front. 36.3 is kind of, in my opinion, the maximum. Say if you're going to ride it 2 up, I run it at 36. Probably 32 is a more appropriate pressure. If you're single, you know, riding it on your own, you're about 150 pounds. So you have the tire, you got the valve stem. I always push on the valve stem. I look for little cracks, because if it's starting to crack, definitely time to replace it. Probably time to replace the tire as well, because tires have a limited age as well. They say 10 years for motorcycle tires. I'm more like 5 years, because I like fresh rubber, and that's pretty important part of the vehicle. So oftentimes a front tire, they will dry rot or just age out before they actually are worn out, or they'll get abnormal wear to them. But I'm going to show you how to do the pressure with something like this. We have this on the Scooter West web store. It's called Tool-Air. Pretty inexpensive, useful even on a car. It's big enough for a car. So I have it set the PSI, and you unthread the cap right there, and we'll thread this right on, and it will immediately display the pressure. And I'm losing a little bit of pressure. It's pretty close. So say I do want to set the 26. and then you can push the center button and it will stop right when it's at the right pressure. So you should be checking the air pressure. Piaggio recommends every single ride, and that's probably not a bad idea. That's what the lawyers probably say, check it every single ride. But I certainly would check them every maybe 2 weeks would be a good rule of thumb. If you don't use a scooter for 2 weeks, you probably want to check it and kind of know how much you lose. Once you own a scooter, you're like, well, I see it drops like 3 PSI after 2 weeks or 5 PSI after 2 weeks. I need to add a little bit. But maybe I check the pressure and I see it's 10 PSI. Well, that's probably an indication that there's a puncture in the tire or somewhere where it's losing air pressure. And I would probably want to check the tire a little further before I go for a ride. Obviously, the brand new tire right here, you can see the tread is pretty deep. You know, I'm going to use this penny as an example, but you could put that right in there and the head completely disappears. But oftentimes, I'll kind of lift the scooter. You can maybe have somebody help you and take the pressure. I look for something like a nail, a cut, a puncture. If it's losing air, you can use a real light, pretty much a couple drops of dish soap in a spray bottle of water is enough to make some suds and spray the whole tire down, look for where it's leaking if you want to do it yourself. But more important, you want to check the tread. On the front tire, they tend to wear kind of unevenly. They'll have a cupping sometimes to them. That does affect the handling, but the general rule of thumb is that the top of the penny to the head is about a 1/16 of an inch or around a millimeter, and that's about as thin as the tread you want to have. So once you can see the penny head, when it looks like that, then it's definitely time to replace the tires. Maybe even sooner on a front tire is my instinct. But I have a lot of customers, they want to save the money and run the tires until they're aged out or just worn out, or they get a puncture where they're not really salvageable. So the rear tire is best to check when everything's cold. Same with the tire pressure. That rated pressure is actually cold pressure, because the pressure does increase as you operate the scooter, especially with the rear tire, because you got the heat of the muffler soaking into the wheel. So yeah, the valve stem pretty much works the same as the front. Again, you want to check the tread depth. The tires that tend to wear out the quickest are always going to be the rear on any of these modern scooters, because it's a dry wheel. You have most of your weight bias over that rear tire, so of course you wear out that rear tire sooner than the front tire. A lot of people ask how long they should last. I'll try that again. So a lot of people ask me, how long should the tires last? It kind of completely depends on the brand. So it looks like this scooter includes either Midas or Sava tires. This tire has good grip, but it's not known to last that long. I would say you can get maybe 2,000 to 3,000 miles out of this tire. If you have the Michelin City Grip, that's a much longer wearing tire, and you may get as much as 7,000 or 8,000 miles out of the rear tire. It's a combination of how you ride it, how you care for your tires, and the actual tire compound itself. And it seems like the Michelin's kind of one of the longer lasting, good all around tires, so that's definitely our most popular option. Pirelli and even Kenda makes some really good options that are more affordable for replacement tires for this scooter. We have them all available on Scooter West. Of course, I have videos on how to change a tire if you're going to tackle doing it yourself. The next most important thing is to occasionally check the engine oil. The nice thing about these air-cooled 150 motors, they generally don't need a top off if you just ride them normally. Between my recommendation would be every 3,000 miles do an oil change. No need to really top them off, but you certainly want to check it. If you're riding the scooter hard or at high speed a lot or in high temperatures, it's going to want to tend to use more oil, or if you did modifications to it, of course it's going to use oil. The dipsticks right here, of course, best if the muffler is cold. I don't really want to check this when it's hot. It is on a center stand on a level surface. That's also pretty important. So unthread the dipstick, go ahead and take a rag, wipe it where it's clean, and you can see this little crosshatch right here. If the motor is hot, it's going to read a little higher, and you kind of want to let everything settle so the oil ends up in the oil pan, but the oil expands a little bit as it gets hot, so it might read a little higher than normal. So go ahead and put the dipstick back in, thread it almost all the way in, right where the O-ring stops, and back out. And you can see the oil levels right there, so above 3/4 of this. And the only reason I'd ever top off is if the dipstick came out low. The normal operating range is between here and this top mark. So anywhere in that crosshatch is normal. If you are at the low dot and you want to top it off, it takes about approximately 200 cc's of oil to bring it up to that high mark. If it comes out dry, it's probably likely going to need more oil, and that's probably a dangerous situation for the motor. So in many climates, you may not use a scooter for, I don't know, several months. Maybe you just don't use the scooter that often. Say you use it every 2 weeks. It's just a summer toy for you, and it sits for sometimes a month at a time. I'd highly recommend keeping the battery on a maintainer. And this is a maintenance charger from Battery Tender. This is the most popular brand. We have the higher end model called the selectable one, so it could select different battery chemistries and charges up to 800 milliamps, so it can even top off a weak battery pretty quick. We also have chargers from Optimate, which is an excellent company, and Noco, which uses a different standard connector. Any of those are great. There's like cheap Alibaba knockoff Temu ones that aren't UL certified. I would definitely not recommend using the non-name brand ones. There's something you're leaving plugged into your house on a battery. That just doesn't sound like something you want that may fail, melt down, or overcharge and boil over the battery. Just not a good idea. So spend around $45 to $50 and you can get a really good quality maintenance charger. The newer ones, like these Battery Tenders, are really efficient as well, and they have a nice long hoard. If you bought the scooter from us, typically we install the maintenance leads on there, and there's a connector right here that you just plug it in, plug this in the wall, and there's an owner's manual that tells you what the lights do, and just walk away. It just automatically keeps the battery charged. If you're going to leave the scooter for a very long time, my only recommendation is make sure it's on the center stand. Obviously, hopefully in a garage and not just outdoors sitting on the side of your house. And you probably want to top off the fuel tank all the way up. Fuel does only have a limited lifespan. My recommendations is at minimum go through about 3 tanks of fuel a year in your scooter. So around 500 miles of operation every year, and that will keep the fuel system clean, and with a combination of keeping the battery on a battery tender, you can get the longest service life out of the battery. If you use your scooter every day or weekly, you probably don't even need to be concerned with anything I'm talking about here, because that's enough use. If you're racking up 6,000 miles a year, the charging system in the scooter, which is similar to a small alternator in a car, is going to keep that battery charged up at all times. All right, next I'm going to show you how to access the battery and service the battery on your Primavera or Sprint scooter. This is something, I get a lot of scooters that are towed in. People don't understand what's going on. They don't understand why their battery's dead. The battery, it's a 12-volt lead acid battery, just like you find in a car. They only have a limited lifespan. They're not like high technology lithium ion batteries that have a very long lifespan when properly maintained. Of course, the battery will last longer if it's a high quality battery, and if you keep it maintained, whether with regular operation of the scooter or with the aid of something like that battery tender to keep the battery charge topped off. If you allow the battery to go to a very low state of charge, that damages the battery on these lead acid chemistry. So you're going to need some basic screwdrivers to access the battery, including a Torx, which they call like a star bit. We have these super inexpensive on the Scooter West web store. So if you're buying a battery tender, maybe just look for Tool 60 for the screwdriver handle. It comes with the basics bits, and then Tool 61 for the star bits that access the cover right here. So this little center cover, it's going to be a T25 Torx. And for instance, the reason you may be servicing the battery, a lot of people, they'll call and they'll say, well, the lights on the dash come on, but when I push the start button, everything goes dead, or it just makes a clicking noise. So that's two telltales that your battery is too low or not good enough to start the scooter. Of course, you need to have special equipment to test a battery, something that like a shop like we have a capacity tester and a load tester. But if you have a basic voltmeter, you know, this is just like some simple little voltmeter, you can kind of get a quick state of health of the battery. Earlier I did have this scooter on, the ignition on, for probably 30 minutes, so I know the state of health is not going to be at the highest. You know, so right now it's not too bad, 12.7 volts. So when the scooter's not operating, you'll see a range that's in between about 13 volts all the way to as low as 12 volts. If it's under 12 volts, it's definitely the battery's probably doesn't quite have enough charge to start the scooter. And my recommendation is try charging it with something like a battery tender. And unfortunately, that's not very instant. It's not a supercharger. You got to leave it overnight to bring that battery charge up. And if it still has issues or the battery drains quickly, it doesn't start, probably just want to opt to replace the battery. So I'm going to show you how to do that. So in this little well, there's a strap right here, T30, which is the two sizes larger on those star bits, the Torx bits. And there's a battery strap. This is a pretty important part of the whole battery system. A lot of people throw this away and the battery bounces around and they wonder why the battery terminals come loose. Another thing that you sometimes want to just look at in here is maybe you have an issue with it not starting all the time, or the electronics are having some issues, or it stalls out. First thing to check is always check the battery terminals. So they might be loose like that. Get in there with a Phillips bit and just go ahead and crank both of them. And you can go pretty tight. You don't want to really go at it, but you go pretty tight so there's a square shaped nut under there. It wants to bite into that lead post. So keep in mind those are lead, don't want to eat after you do that. The main fuse is right here, the 20 amp. So if you accidentally touch the terminals reverse, it's going to blow that large 20 amp fuse. So keep that in mind. There is another connection sometimes in here, and it's the diagnostic connector, but the newest 2024s, they do have that underneath the seat. Not something we're concerned about. There's the main battery terminal, so red is positive, goes to the plus sign, and negative is black, and that goes to the minus. The battery only drops in one way, so it's pretty hard to mess that up. And these extra leads right here are for the battery tender charger lead that we route right there. But alternatively, if you need to charge a battery, you can always use these alligator clamps, and they'll clamp right onto the terminals, and you can plug it in as a temporary measure to charge it overnight. So you could disconnect the two terminals, pull the battery straight out, and you could drop a new battery in. You could certainly have somebody test the battery, whether it's like an auto parts store or our dealership. We have all the testers. We're happy to test somebody's battery. Unfortunately, we're unable to test it until it has a full charge, you know, to test the capacity of the battery. So as for other do-it-yourself maintenance in between the standard routine services, you may need to adjust the rear brakes, and you can do that with a 10mm combination wrench. If you watch some of my service videos, I've always shown how to adjust the rear brakes on the Primavera, the Sprint, or the Vespa LX or ET4. They're all pretty much identical on how you adjust that mechanical brake. Typically, they don't need adjustment until the routine services are due, so most of the time you don't need to mess with those. The front brakes generally last quite a long time, and I say anytime you change a tire or you do a service like every 6,000 miles, that's when you inspect the brakes. If you're wearing down brakes in 6,000 miles, you must have this thing on a racetrack, because I rarely see these brakes that are actually the same size as the GTS 300, but on a smaller package. So they last quite a long time. I have a lot of customers, can you just replace the brakes? And I take out the brakes, and there's like, the 12,000 mile scooter still got 75% of life on those brake pads. There was no need to replace them. Of course, keeping the scooter clean is really, really important. You know, corrosion will attack the brake components as well as the cosmetic parts of the scooter. So that's another consideration. You want to keep those parts and the wheels clean. And another thing I get asked about, I just need to buy a spark plug. I have people walk in here all the time, I want to buy a spark plug. I'm like, why do you want to buy a spark plug? They have a very nice NGK spark plug that lasts the service length of the scooter, you know, 6,000 miles. So technically it'll last about 12,000 miles with no issues. So not much need. These things have fuel injection. They're not going to foul out the spark plugs. They generally keep the plug really clean, and with a high quality plug, it's not something you need to mess with. Like most modern cars, I think the plugs are rated for 100,000 miles. All right, so one more bonus part of this video. Just noises that a scooter makes in general operation, whether it's normal or not normal. I get a lot of those questions all the time. So the most common noise I get a complaint about is the front brakes specifically. So people have a brand new scooter, they'll hit the front brake and they'll have a little noise, like a swirling, like noise. It's gonna be really hard to record any of those noises, but whenever you act on the front brakes, it does make kind of a clicking, like whirling noise, kind of, and obviously that noise kind of slows down as they're slowing down. Well, with the brake rotors on these scooters, they have a brake rotor that's referred to as a vented rotor. So there's drilled holes in there, and those little holes catch the brake pad material, and that's what makes that little noise versus a solid rotor that would make nearly as much noise. So that's pretty normal to hear those kind of noises. Another noise is brake squeak. It's pretty hard to get away from it. You got to clean the dust out of the brakes. Sometimes they eliminate that noise, or there's sometimes parts of the brake components that wear out that will cause that squeal noise. It's very different than a car. The squeal noise on car brakes is typically when the brakes are worn to their service limit, because they have a piece of metal that intentionally makes a squeal noise. The squeal on scooter brakes is typically from brake dust buildup, and it may even come from the rear drum brake, which is typically pretty low maintenance. You could try blowing out with some compressed air, but it's nothing to be concerned about the brakes being worn out or ineffective. If the front is making a real raspy metallic noise, the brake pads definitely are worn to the metal back plates of the pads. There's no more friction material left, and you're damaging the rotor. But they may make a little squeal. Not too common on the Primavera, but if they do make a little squeal, sometimes they just do that on the first couple applications of the brakes, is in my experience. And once the brakes are warmed up, they may not squeal and they're still operating normally. Another noise that sometimes people complain about is the clicking from a hot exhaust, and also what sounds like flatulence. Once you park the scooter after a hot day, it sometimes will sound like a little belch or a fart somewhere inside the tank, and there's valves that relieve pressure from the fuel tank into the evaporative emission system, and when that fuel tank pressure builds, it will make those little fart noises. Get right to it. And the clicking of the exhaust, that's pretty normal because the metal is expanded, and as it shrinks down, it kind of makes some metallic clicking noise. And that's when the scooter's turned off after it's been warmed up. And the hotter the engine is, the hotter the day is, the more likely you're going to hear those noises from the scooter. They don't have any electric cooling fans. There's not really any electric kind of noises that you should hear from the scooter. Sometimes people complain about their scooter not starting and making a rapid clicking noise. So you pull the brake, the dashboard kind of goes out and makes a rapid fire clicking noise. That's actually the starter relay acting on and off. There's not enough current that can get to the starter, so it will make like a rapid clicking noise and the scooter won't start. As the scooter ages, the belt transmission will make more noises, and typically those noises come from the clutch, the rollers, and the variator that wear out over time. So all those are considered wear items, and if you service the transmission, usually you replace those. A ticking noise may be from the valves. Of course, you check the valves at the first service and then every 6,000 miles thereafter. Other than that, they're pretty quiet motors. There's not too many abnormal noises that I know of otherwise on these Primaveras or Sprints. All right, well, thanks for listening or watching. However, you got all my several minutes of content about everything you need to know about owning your Vespa Primavera or Sprint. I'll see you on the next one. This is Roby here from Vespa Motorsport and ScooterWest.com. If you're looking to accessorize your scooter, go to our website, ScooterWest.com. If you're looking to tackle your own maintenance, of course, I have videos going back for several years on the Primavera Sprint. I'm doing any of the services that you can ever think of for the Primavera and Sprint scooter. See you on the next one. Ride safe and stop on by when you're in San Diego, Vespa Motorsport.